Okay, here we go for the 10th time. My name is Latham, aka Manchild, and I am going to be doing a tutorial on the biker gif that you may have seen on Dribble. I got asked by a couple of people if I could do a tutorial on this, so here I am. So this is the original illustration that I got. It wasn't done by me, it was done by this fantastic guy called Kirk Wallace. Here's some of his other stuff that he does. Really cool stuff. Anyway, what he gave me was this illustration split up into layers. That was great, but what I needed to do from there is split this up even more. So what I did is I created this separate illustration with individual layers, and just the biker, no bike, no background, no splashes, no clouds, no anything else. From here, what I had to do is I had to pre-plan it, because what I was doing is I was using this program in After Effects called Duik. It is a free plugin for After Effects, which, like as you saw, has its own window in After Effects. Really helpful, really easy to download and install, and it is an inverse kinematics program which basically helps you with rigging and character animation. So if we go in here, and this is what we will be doing later, but if you click on auto rig, you can see that there are these separate layers, and what these separate layers are the layers that we will need to bring into Illustrator. So the head, the neck, the body, etc, etc. So if we go into here and bring up both, you can see that I've got the head, the neck, the body there, and so on and so forth. They're all named exactly the same. One thing you might notice is that there are more sections, and that is because in our illustration we only have one layer for each leg, and in Duik you need 3 layers for the leg, so that includes the thigh, the knee, and the foot. So from here we have to save it out for After Effects. If you don't know how to do that, make sure it is RGB, and that each separate layer, each layer that you want separate, needs to be on its own separate layer, not within a layer. So once you save that out, you can go into After Effects, and I don't want to close After Effects. You can go into After Effects, open up an entirely new comp, and import the layer that the Illustrator file that you're using. Sorry. When you're in this, don't do footage. Footage will pull it in as a single layer, which is what you don't want. Pull it in as a composition. This will bring it in as a composition, and inside that composition are the separate layers. Voila. So when you've got this dude in here, the first thing I screwed up several times, and I didn't know until afterwards, this back leg here, that is a problem with Duik, because Duik works better when you've got a straight leg or a straight object going into a bent state rather than a bent state into a straight state. So the first thing I had to do was delete that and duplicate the front leg, so we had 2 back legs. I mean, a front leg and a back leg. So there we go, 2 legs. Once you've got that, the second thing we need to do is Duik will eventually, when it's all set up, rotate the objects around their own anchor points. And so we need to set the anchor points up where the actual body parts would rotate around. So for example, the head would rotate around the neck, so move the anchor point there. Make sure you've got the pan behind tool, which is this one up here, or shortcut is Y. That will allow you to move the anchor point without moving the actual layer. Bring the neck down to where the neck would rotate. Bring the hands to the wrist, and the forearm to the elbow, and the upper arm to the shoulder, so on and so forth. Make sure the body rotates around the pelvis. The bag we don't need to do, because we will be parenting the bag later on to another layer, so it'll just follow that layer. The pelvis would rotate around the pelvis, roughly about there. Alright, so once you've done that, you are getting there. Next thing you need to do is we need to split these legs into the layers that Duik can read. So that means we need to use the puppet pin tool to create these points. So we need a right thigh, a right calf, right foot, left thigh, left calf, left foot. So first we will get this front leg and we will put a pin in the right thigh, the right calf, which is the knee, and the right foot. Go into the menu for the puppet, and here you've got each individual puppet point. What you need to do from here is you need to use this feature in Duik called bones, and what it does, it creates a joint, a bone, in the layer that you're using. So Duik can read that and complete this rig. So you need to create the bone. So click on that puppet pin that you want to bone. That sounds rude. I've got a dirty mind. Click on the puppet pin that you want to add a bone to, and click bone. And now we need to rename this layer as right thigh. Next, we need to rename that layer right calf. And what you can see is what it is doing is it is creating nulls at those points that are control points, essentially, that Duik can use. And last of all, we need the right foot. You have to go back through, do the same thing for the back leg. So 3 points, one at the knee, one at the foot, one at the thigh, foot, calf, thigh. Yep, so that's all set up. What you need to do now is unselect everything and click this auto rig button, and what you can see is it has automatically hooked up. Each box is synced, basically. You need to click OK. What this does is it works as magic, creates these crazy expressions that I don't understand, and gives you this. You have these points you don't need anymore. You have these new nulls, which are the control points that you need to animate. So now all you basically have to animate is these points, and things get a whole lot easier and more fluid, more realistic, all that kind of jazz. Really, really helpful way of doing things, really easy way of doing things. So you've got the master. What the master is, it is literally the master and controls every single point. But what you have is, if you have the pelvis, you can move this pelvis and it'll move every single thing that is connected to that. And if you have this other pelvis joint, you can see that we can bend and stretch, and it's really, really fun the first time around. You can see what this is doing. So again, a really easy way of doing things. Reset that. Oh wait, oh no, oh no, oh jeez, oh god. Right, so now that we are back to where I was and I monumentally screwed that up, we can carry on. What I did was, after I created the rig, I went undo stupidly, and After Effects just got really confused, and all of its expressions, all of the expressions made by Duik screwed up. So that's what I'm talking about. This is a very picky plugin that you really have to get right, and if you don't get it right, you will find out, and it'll suck, because I've had to do this so many times now. Okay, now that we are back to where we are, and this is all working just the way we want it to. Yep, looks pretty good to me. Don't be stupid, go and do. That is the moral of the story. What you want to do is first fix these hands, and what they are doing is they are moving the wrong way. So it looks like his elbows are completely dislocated. So if you go into the effects controls for the hands, you can see this orientation box, and if you untick the orientation box, you see the orientation of the hands completely changes, and now they are moving the way we want them to. You can still rotate your layers afterwards, which is pretty handy, because what I had to do was rotate these layers to make sure they are fitting on the bike handles correctly. But basically from here we are ready to roll. That's kind of a pun, I guess. Andrew Kramer styles. So the way I did the bike animation is created a completely separate Illustrator comp that just had bike in the clouds and actually didn't have these puddles in the end, so no puddles. I'll just get rid of the puddles. So we have these layers here, and this is all separate again. Like, all these layers are separate so that when we pull it into After Effects, we do not have to muck around with masking and maybe redrawing in After Effects, etc. So pull the layer into After Effects again as a composition. In this composition, I have to get rid of these again. I'll just go over the clouds quickly. The clouds were a loop. I masked them out because they're on one layer at the moment. So what I did is I duplicated the layer several times. I masked out each individual cloud. You could do this and separate them in Illustrator, probably the easier way to do it. I pre-comped them, so highlight them all, Control Shift P or Command Shift P, I guess, on a Mac, and call those clouds. Make them 3D layers, and why I made them 3D is so I could push one back, pull one forwards, like put them, offset them in Z space. So when I did move these, I also had motion blur on them to increase the sense of motion. So I added a null. Once I did hook these up to the null and moved them, what happens is, see, they all move at different speeds, which really like helps with the depth in the actual image. I keyframed the position, duplicated the clouds, so I had two sets of clouds, offset them so they're all back here, and then I animated it from here. Make sure I put them in the same place, and let's say to a second. Let's say it's a second loop, and then I could animate them back here. And so what happened was, if I looped that down, this won't work perfectly. But yeah, see, there are some clouds chopping out, and that was because I didn't push these clouds back far enough. But you can see most of these clouds are looping seamlessly. It's a bit slow for my liking, so if I pulled the animation down to, say, 19 frames and did it there, even so it's not fast enough, but you get the idea. If we go back into our bike comp, this is all, I won't go over each individual layer and how I did each individual layer. But essentially what I did is I wanted the biker to go double time to the bike going normal time. So, for example, I would have the wheel going, I'd keyframe the position, and let's say I animated to 15 seconds, and put a keyframe there, and pull the bike wheel out. So what I wanted to do is have the bike squish, like squash and stretch, the animation principle. And this just helped to give it a cartoonish, fun feel to the animation, something like not so strict and rigid. So I'd put a keyframe there, and again I would copy the first keyframe, make sure it's exactly the same place, the tire, and then I could have it go back to its original position and loop correctly. So if you F9, unfortunately my keyframes aren't working because of the recording software I'm using. So if you press F9, it will create an ease, kind of like this. It'll probably be more like this. And if you don't understand the graph tool, this is basically the speed of motion. This is the value graph. This is the speed graph. The value graph is different again, but the speed graph is more simple, and in this situation it works absolutely fine. So what this means is the wheel starts slowly, goes really fast, and peaks, and then trails off. And so it'll go slow, fast, slow, and eases in. And then again you'd want to do the same motion and do it back out. And then when you loop that, you have this. An issue we came across here is the bike wheel is moving by itself, so you will want to get the layers that are attached, like the wheel layers, and you'll want to get them and parent them to the wheel. So if you grab the pick whip tool and pick whip it to the front wheel, what happens now is it's moving with it. Again, you want to do this with these motion lines in the tire. So pick whip it and pick whip it to the wheel. What I did with the lines is, again, to create that sense of motion, I made them rotate incredibly fast. And ooh, I am rotating the wrong thing. And as I was saying, rotated them really fast. So I don't know, maybe like 20 times in a second. And I didn't need to ease these because they were constantly rotating and weren't coming back to a position in the end. So then they would kind of look like this. That's pretty wild. So if you put some motion blur on there, what you get is this, like, it looks like it's spinning really fast. 20 times maybe a bit too fast, maybe go 12 or something like that. So there you have the motion of the tire. I did actually end up rotating the tire just to, again, make it look, giving it like more animation, more to make the actual frame interesting. The more you animate, the more depth the scene will have, the more interesting the scene will be. I rotated the wheel like, let's say 40 degrees, and then I rotated it back again. So this was kind of playing off the idea that it's going so fast it looks like it's sort of spinning on the spot, if you know what I'm talking about. Like if you see a tire spinning really fast and it ends up spinning so fast it looks like it's spinning backwards. It's that sort of effect. So like when you played that, it just sort of spins forwards and back and forwards and back and forwards and back. I ended up doing the exact same thing for the back tire, and obviously the wheel is disconnecting itself from here, so what I had to do was make sure this part of the bike, which is separate, as I said, separate every layer you can, because it'll be incredibly helpful afterwards. You'll have more flexibility. You have to grab the layer, make sure it rotates, and you'll rotate it out so it reaches the center of the wheel, and you want to rotate it back in. And this, there's probably a better way to do this, but it didn't really matter in this way because everything was moving at the exact same speed. So this would move out with the wheel and back in with the wheel, and it looked absolutely fine. You could do this using expressions or pick whipping it correctly, but in this situation this worked absolutely fine with me. The other thing you will have to do, which takes a bit more time because you just have to find the layers, is because the wheels are moving out, the bike had to move down, so the parts of the bike, these front parts of the bike here, could move it out and stay with the wheel, because when it ends here, it's quite a wee way above the wheel. So I had to end up getting all of these layers. I'll just pick these ones for the meantime, put them on a null so they could all be controlled with this one null, and then I would put it down so it looks like it's been there, and then again get the first keyframe and pull it back so it loops correctly. So after playing with the graph, what you see is the bike is doing that moving motion you see on my dribble profile. So if we go to the dribble, you can see it moves out and back up and out and back up and out and back up. It's exactly what I'm doing here. It's just I haven't collected some of the layers. It's also moving a lot slower because the last animation I did was 10 frames or so shorter, so it's a bit slower here, but it is the exact same concept. Last thing I had to do was sprocket, if that is what it's called, and make sure the pedal bars are actually, the anchor points rotate around the right place. So here's the back pedal. So now what will happen is if you pick whip this to the sprocket and you get the front bar pick whip to the sprocket and you rotate the sprocket, I rotated it so it went 180 degrees. And so when I animated this, I animated it 180 degrees and then another 180 degrees. So then I wanted it to be moving almost as if it is one long motion. I wanted it to animate so there is force down and a slight stop at the bottom, as if he's like putting like so much force in, but it's quite stilted. So for that I had to move these keyframes so they weren't entirely at the bottom here, 360 degrees. It would go, I guess it doesn't entirely stop, but it has enough like of that push down that you can see. After animating all this other cosmetic stuff like the seat bounce and the handlebars moving, and there was some light reflection on the light, and everything was hooked up correctly, there was movement in the chain, the back wheel was all animated, I could then move on to pulling the bike animation into the rider animation. So I could pull this comp in, and if I place it here, you can see that these layers like almost link up. From here, this is where you need to sync the rider with the bike. So this is where all this rigging really comes into play. So mainly you'll just be animating the position of them. For example, if we did the foot first, I'd animate again, because it is a 30-second animation and keyframes are at halfway, so 15 frames. I put one and make sure you can see that the foot begins at the bottom and then it moves up and around to the top. So you need to make sure that this guy brings his foot right up. There is some mismatch in here, so to correct that, what I did is I played with the arc of the spin, and he brings his foot up in the correct arc, the same arc as the pedal. And again, this takes a whole lot of playing with, like a lot of playing to get it right. As you can see, I also rotated the pedal, like the actual pedals, so when they rotated, they would rotate negative to the bar or to the sprocket. So let's say this is animating 180 degrees forwards. I want to animate this backwards so that when it did spin, it spun so that it always remained flat, if that makes sense. You can see, you'll be able to see it when I render this out. So see, it remains flat now, and which is what would happen in a real biking situation. So he would pull his foot round. Again, this takes a lot of playing with. I didn't have to be completely accurate with this again, because the animation moved so fast you didn't even see his foot would lift off of the pedal. So see, that's roughly what you want. And then again, you want to copy the first keyframe and place it back at the start, and there you have it. You want to again play with these keyframes and play with these bars to make sure you've got it all lined up correctly. So his foot is coming around with the pedal, and then when you loop it, you can see that his foot is kind of moving with the pedal. Again, this is like there are some leg issues with the biker making sure he moved correctly. I had to animate both pelvis nulls, and for example, he would be up here at one point, and the second he'd be down here at halfway. This is where I brought in the double time animation. So he would be down and back up again within the time the bike was just down. I'm just opening up my actual composition of the biker now so that you can see how I animated the pelvis and the arms and the legs and stuff like that. So here you can see that the leg moved with the pedals, but they didn't move exactly with the pedals. It was the speed of the animation which meant you couldn't actually see that they were not going with the pedals exactly. You can see that he is moving up and down within the bike the time that the bike is going out and in. So that is what I mean by double time. It takes a while to, like, it took me a lot of fiddling to make sure I got the biker looking as if he is traveling with, like, his pelvis is moving in the right motion. So what I had him doing is when he pushed up or down, he pushed his body down up, and like I would do this sort of, like, here you can see it's got this curvature to his body movement and then back out. So it kind of made this like teardrop shape in animation. So it'd be down and loop around and down and loop around, which really helped sell that like eagerness and like the look of expression on the actual hipster's face. Then there are things like all this like cosmetic animation, like secondary animation. The bag bounces up and down. That is just a couple of rotation keyframes. I had the bag straps flapping about. So on the bag strap, what I did is I added this ripple effect. So what that does is it literally makes a ripple. So it sort of looks like it is being blown in the wind, and there are little ripples going through the strap itself. And then I just added a effect called CC Bend It, which kind of helped me like make it flap a little bit more accessibly and make it like look like it's really flapping in the wind and he's going really fast, so it's affecting the bag strap. The cap is just a whole lot of keyframes on a shape path here, and you can see I've put a couple of keyframes here, so each keyframe is just it bending slightly different, as you can see there. So it bends in and then out and then in then out, and all these different, they were each custom keyframes to make it look like it is a very random animation, and it make it look more realistic. I had the hat bouncing up and down. I had the beard wobbling in the wind. For the beard, what I did first was I had this beard layer and I recreated it using shape layers. And because in shape layers you can have these effects, you can add these effects to them, and the effect I added to this one is the wiggle paths. So what the wiggle paths did is, if I move this, you can see it like wiggles the actual shape itself. So I made a wiggle on the beard, and then I pre-comped the beard, and to add even more wiggle, I used a puppet tool, which we used to rig the legs. And the puppet tool, you can see the pins, they go up and down and up and down and up and down, and make it look really like flappy. And again, like this all just adds to the experience of like speed, quirkiness, all these things I wanted to have in this animation. That is really the basics of the animation. That is what got this animation to where it is. A whole lot of that was just after that, adding little things like light glares. I even have like this little sparkle on the watch, which you may not have noticed because it was so tiny, but I just wanted to add more and more stuff to make the scene like more complex, more fun to watch. Make sure you can watch it over and over again and never get bored with it. the seat bounces up and down. Like when the bike goes down, there is some like lag in the seat of the bike, and it lags, and then it drops down and does this little like bounce on the seat. I mean on the bike. Again, these are all just concepts. You don't have to take them literally. You can think, oh, that's shit, and do them completely your own way. That is absolutely fine. These are really like just tips on how I got here, and when you get here, this is just a bunch of fiddling around and playing with what you have and trying to get what you like, the best outcome for what, like how you want it to come out. That is the animation I created. So that was probably a terrible tutorial. You probably learned nothing off that. But I hope the one thing you take away from this is that this is always a lot of playing around, and like even all my animations I ever do, I spend far more time pissing around, coming up with really terrible stuff before I even get to the main thing. And then because I've already like played around with all this stuff, I have this great concept of where I actually want it to be at the end. Just make sure you dig in, play around, come out with a solution that you really like yourself.